My fiance left me alone in the woods. I have been with my fiance for 6 years. I am 26 and he is 32. He has always had a short temper and often picks arguments over small things, but he's so very kind. Every other time that I have looked past it and maybe hoped to help him chill out, he's funny and I really do love him. I do my best to avoid arguments, but sometimes it's impossible. I remember feeling so happy and content because we hadn't argued in several days and he had been in a good mood. We began to leave and started heading home, still in good spirits. The beach was located in a remote area, and neither of us had good cell phone signal to use GPS to leave. He began to yell and take his anger out on the steering wheel, and I instantly felt defensive. Like every happy moment of the day was crumbling right there because usually once his behavior starts, the day is ruined. I made the mistake of yelling back at him and that he needs to chill out, quit making everything such a huge deal. I regret this, but I just felt so overwhelmed. I just wanted the good vibes to continue, you know? We argued back and forth for a few moments before he angrily pulled the truck to a small paved parking lot where people usually stop to rest or grill food. He screamed at me to get out, and like an idiot, I did, and he left me there. I sat in the bush and cried for a few minutes before a man approached me and started asking kind of uncomfortable questions about where I was from, who I was with, why we were there. I tried to be friendly in the hopes my fiance would return soon, but the stranger started touching my hands and offered me a ride home, and it made me scared, so I lied and said I had to go meet my boyfriend at a spot nearby and walked down the road quickly. I made it about a quarter of a mile away before I sat by a little pond where some people were fishing. I had no cell phone signal to call anyone to get me, and I was scared to ask for help, so I just sat there and tried not to panic for almost 3 hours. He left you there for 3 hours? I was alone the majority of the time, as when I arrived, the only people around were people packed and ready to leave. From 4 to 6:30 p.m., I was left alone in the forest until I was able to find cell phone service after wandering for a bit and called my fiance's mom to come get me. It is now almost 8 p.m. and I am extremely sunburned and thirsty, but I finally walked far enough to get signal to call his mom for help. I haven't spoken to him yet, but he has sent several messages basically just asking where I was and complaining that I had his wallet in my purse. I'm still waiting for my ride to get here, still very lost and upset. I feel so hurt and betrayed, and as if this was a huge overreaction on his end, but I do love him, and if it's my fault, I want to know. It was such a scary experience, which is why I feel it was too much. It is not normal for anyone, let alone someone who's supposed to be the love of your life, to leave you stranded in a forest to fend for yourself. Ever. Ever. Okay, so she has a small little update. I am currently safe and staying the night with my mom. After my fiance and his mom finally found me after a stranger noticed me on the side of the road and drove me around the park for 15 minutes looking for them, they both started in at me that this was all my fault because I should have just refused to get out of the car to begin with. I realize that is what logic would tell you to do, but it's hard to be logical when you are upset, tipsy, and being screamed at. He also claimed that he looked for me for almost 2 hours before leaving to rally help in looking. His mom swears up and down he's telling the truth too, but I don't believe it. I sat in the spot he left me for at least 30 minutes before I was scared off by a stranger, and then I sat in a very visible, heavily trafficked area next to a creek that was maybe a quarter mile from where I started with no visual barriers whatsoever. I never saw or heard him drive by once. I remember listening closely for him because his truck is loud and I would have heard it coming. I can see now that he has put me in grave danger. He has still not apologized, but I don't expect him to because he thinks he is in the right in this. I'm going to try and remove him from my life and spend some time alone. I will admit that in my quest for love and closeness, I have let him and other men treat me less than great just to keep them around. Thank you all again for helping me understand what a doormat I've been. I'm trying to force this man to love me when I have forgotten to love myself. Am I wrong for pulling out of planning my sister's wedding, causing her to lose her venue? As a wedding planner who has been in the industry for many years now, my 31 mil party trick amongst close friends and family is being able to guess how long my clients' marriages will last with pretty alarming accuracy. If you ask anyone in the industry, there are specific indicators while working with a couple that allow us to be able to gauge compatibility. I can usually get down to around a 6-month window when predicting when photos of each other will disappear from socials. This is not me taking joy in crashing and burning of relationships. Working in this career field can actually leave you feeling jaded about relationships in general, which is why I'm reluctant to work for friends and family. The specific stress wedding planning puts on some people/couples can bring out the worst in them that you don't see in everyday life. My sister is getting married early next year and practically begged me to plan for her despite my stance on clients I know personally. I finally gave in and we began the process back in March. Last week, while we were meeting and finalizing a few things, she asked me about the party trick I mentioned. She said since I had been working with her and her fiance for months now, I could give my prediction as to how long they were going to last. I laughed and tried to move on. I thought she was joking, but she continued to press the issue. After her continually bothering me about this for at least 15 minutes when I'm trying to move on, I do have work outside of my specific appointment with her that I need to get to. I finally told her I thought they would last forever. She claimed she didn't believe me and wanted my real number, so I shrugged and told her the truth. A year and a half. She was livid. I felt incredibly uncomfortable with the whole ordeal, especially with how little she respected my boundaries in what is supposed to be a professional setting. I felt incredibly uncomfortable with the whole ordeal, especially with how little she respected my boundaries in what is supposed to be a professional setting, and just tried to usher her out of my office. Instead, she began ranting about my own marriage and said she gave us until the end of the year before we break up and accused me of being a homewrecker. She finally left and I emailed her saying I would no longer be involved in planning. I gave her the contact information for all of the vendors we were working with, but told her the venue would no longer be available as they only book to people they have existing relationships with and my involvement was necessary. I have had to break up with clients before, but this felt particularly rough. She has now told our parents that I am purposefully sabotaging her wedding and that I was unforgivably rude to her when she just asked a playful question. I feel very silly for letting a person disrespect my boundaries over and over again, something I typically wouldn't tolerate, but now I'm wondering if I'm in the wrong. So, am I the asshole? Am I wrong for being pissed that there was no alcohol at a wedding? One of my 35 male best friends, 34 male, got married last week. He drinks alcohol and our friend group will meet up at breweries a few times a month to hang out. His fiance, now wife, does not drink. It's never been a part of her life. My wife and I got a hotel room by the reception space and Ubered to the wedding. The ceremony occurs, we go to what's supposed to be cocktail hour, and there was just soda and water. No alcohol. This was not something we knew about ahead of time. There was palpable buzz among our friend group at the lack of booze. A lot of us had spent money on a hotel room and Ubering anticipating drinking. Kind of pissed. Bride and groom come to cocktail hour, everyone cheers, and when the bride and groom come mingle with us, I asked, "Where's the booze?" His wife chimes in saying her family does not drink and that they were paying for the wedding, thus no alcohol. I told him that we should have known that ahead of time. I say I wasted money on a hotel room and Ubering. The bride does not take my commentary well and implies I might have a drinking problem. I don't. I only drink with my friends. The groom says I don't need to be such an asshole. I reiterate that I spent a bunch of money on something I didn't need. We all did. The bride's pissed at me and asked me to leave. My wife and I leave, but it's clear I touched a nerve. In our group chat, friends were mixed on me saying something. My wife said I wasn't wrong, but my timing was wrong. So was I the asshole? Am I wrong for pre-gaming my wife's dinners? My wife and I are both 32. Since we got married and moved in together 5 months ago, my wife has simply not made nearly enough food for me. This is not the kind of situation where I'm constantly agitated at her for incompetence or anything like that. I would be more than happy to microwave a burrito. I would be more than happy to whip up a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But I can't. My wife has, every single night of our marriage, done the same thing. She'll make me a tiny dinner. I'm talking like a Chinese chicken salad with 30 grams of chicken and 10 leaves of lettuce arranged fashionably with dressing. When I finish eating, I'm still hungry because for a 230-pound man who works a physical labor job, it's not enough food. At first, I tried to openly communicate with her, but she always took it horribly. She would adopt a 1,000-yard stare and then begin talking about how incompetent she is and how she can't even make her husband a proper dinner. I try to calm her down with, "Oh honey, that's not the case. I just eat too much." Or, "Don't worry about it. I can make a bit more." I try to be overwhelmingly positive. It never helped. She would always just get incredibly disappointed in herself, cry, and or take it out on me. And then she would make the same exact amount the following day. After the communication route failed, I tried to eat her dinners as is. It became hard to sleep at night due to hunger, and I lost 7 pounds in the first month. Eventually, I figured out my own system. On my way home from work, I started swinging by a fast food restaurant and getting myself a burger. I would basically pregame her meals with some more calories. I figured it was a win-win as what she doesn't know can't hurt her, and I could have my fill of food. I would eat on my way home, walk in the door, pick at the salad or quinoa or homemade mac and cheese she made, compliment her for her delicious cooking, and later dispose of the wrappers discreetly. 2 days ago, I was on my way home and in line at a drive-thru. My mother-in-law was coming out of the restaurant. She ran over and greeted me. I asked her in a humorous way not to tell her daughter where she saw me because she'd take it badly, and she agreed. But then she knocked on me anyway. I got home to a furious wife who demanded details. When I provided the truth, she got extremely angry and looked legitimately hurt. I'm not good at handling confrontation and feel like I betrayed my wife in some way. Was I wrong here?
Am I wrong for telling my brother-in-law to F off after he called my son a girl for being in therapy? My 38 male 15-year-old son has been in therapy for the past few months after his best friend died. It was very hard for him, and while I've always been there to help him, of course, my wife and I felt a therapist would be best. And he seems to be making a lot of progress, so I know that it's working. Unfortunately, my brother is a man who can't express his feelings kind of guy, and I've always thought that that was BS. Unfortunately, my brother-in-law is one of those men that can't express their feelings, and I've always thought that was BS. So I made sure that my wife and I were on the same page about never letting that happen. Well, last night there was a family gathering, and my son had just had his therapy session. So we picked him up and drove there. At the family gathering, my son was telling me about something they talked about, and my brother-in-law must have overheard because he started a tangent. He went on about boys not needing therapy and actually called him a girl. Am I wrong for telling my brother-in-law to F off after he called my son for being in therapy? I wouldn't have reacted as much if my son wasn't there, but my son was visibly hurt by what he said. I was pissed and told him to F off and that right now my son is more of a man than he is. I would have said more, but I didn't want to upset my son further, and I do admit I might have went a little too far, but I was defending my son. And I don't think someone who shames someone else for being healthy while also being sexist is being a man. After that, my brother-in-law glared at me and stormed out of the house. Then my wife said it's time to go, so I grabbed my son and we left. And to be honest, my son said nothing much after that, but my wife sure did. Now she's very upset with me because I disrespected her brother, but I tried to explain I was defending our son. But she's decided to not hear me out and even go as far as to ignore me. I'm still mad over it because my son was shamed for expressing his emotions and then everyone gets mad at me just for defending him.